Basically left with nothing. Too trapped in a war to be at peace.
Is that a noose or Mardi Gras beads? I'm not sure. This professor who's featured today, famous, he should be happy about it. Kevin Howard from the University of North Texas. That's Kevin Howard from the University of North Texas. And the course that he is teaching is Diverse Learners in spring of 2022. Teaching diverse learners. Why don't you just do it?
Yes.
Why don't you just teach a diverse group of people? Why do you need to teach people how to teach diverse learners? So let's go through a few things.
That book, Anti-Racist Baby.
Right.
Where you're like, good news, it is.
Right. So one of the first things that he discusses in the syllabus is gender pronouns. We'll get to this, then we have some audio recordings. According to the syllabus, the class, quote, will focus on structures of the social, and you'll hear the clips, this is pretty close.
Okay. Good.
Social, structures of social and educational inequality, in particular as they relate to race, class, and gender, processes of power and control in education.
Jeez.
It sounds like psycho gobbledygook.
It does.
And it is. But it's also really scary when you actually think about what that means.
Control in education, yes, because conservatives dominate that industry.
Yes. And just so you know, this professor is every bit as radical as you might have guessed from the syllabus. So here's Professor Howard discussing in his class, and some of these clips are a little bit longer for context. All of these are available at louderwithcrowder.com. The link is in the description as far as all of the references. Here is Professor Howard discussing in a not so subtly racist way, whiteness.
To watch televised thing is inherently heteronormative. Inherently masculine, which delves into the intersectionality of whiteness. Nobody calls it out. That's why theorists are saying it's invisible. Because nobody calls it out, then it becomes the norm. Make sense? And when something is the norm, if no one points it out, if no one questions it, then it's unchecked, unmarked. It's invisible. It's fluid. It moves. And we talked about this last class, right? Classism. We understand how that operated. The bourgeoisie and the folks who are taking lands. Even when we come to taking lands, we think of it even as colonization. Thins out, right? So there are so many pillars and so many things happening all at once simultaneously.
So let's see some of the problems there where he says it is inherently heteronormative to watch TV. What are we doing? This is something that can't be disproven. This should not be the realm of professors, by the way, in the same way that it should not be the realm of science. Well, hold on a second. I don't think it's heteronormative simply to watch TV. It doesn't matter. He's made the accusation. What does that do? That tries to instill guilt in a good portion of that classroom. What do you think straight white males? How do you think they feel in that classroom? What if you said watching television is actually Afro-American normative? Afro-lesbian normative? Probably wouldn't go over too well. So we've just laid at the feet in a way that cannot be proven, and certainly in a way that cannot be questioned, again, because you are a forced captive audience with this professor. Guilty, 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 guilty. Guilty by history, guilty by association, guilty by your everyday activities watching television. That's heteronormative.
I put a huge emphasis on saving lives. The fact of the matter, though, is that any lives saved do not replace those that have been lost. Thus, I am basically left with nothing. Too trapped in a war to be at peace.
Is that a noose or Mardi Gras beads? I'm not sure.
It's a garage door pull.
It's anal beads.
This is what brought me to my final mission.
Nothing heteronormative about that.
Wow. Where's his Emmy?
I wouldn't accept it. They'll just play me off.
Fabulous.
I'm an artist. Sorry, I meant professor.
How did he do the voice so well?
It's just he's an actor.
Was he getting hung for being black or gay?
I have no idea.
Probably
for
gay.
not being a great actor.
Well, I'm just wondering what the play's.
That was the era's equivalent of the Razzie.
I'm honestly asking. I assume that was what the play was about, right?
I have no idea. Seems about right. Let's go with that. Here's the same professor, Professor Howard, of course, discussing. So now what we have is a professor in a position of power. Okay. So when people talk about the power structures that be, this is a very common theme. And I hate it when the left, they'll accuse, they'll be like, you're projecting. Well, okay, projection is a real thing, but it's not a real thing as it relates to, for disdain over like serious perversions or serious crimes. So the left will say, why are you obsessed with pedophiles, huh? Are you a pedophile? No, that's not a real thing. Why are you against gay marriage? Are you gay? No, that's not a real thing. Where you do see projection, though, is in the negative behavioral patterns, especially ones that can't necessarily be proven, for example, in a court of law or through the rational Socratic method. So when they say, we're fighting the power structures, well, hold on a second. This is an actual power structure when you are sitting in a classroom with a professor. That is a person who has been designated the single figure in that classroom in power. They are a king of that classroom. They can silence you. They can decide who speaks. They can decide what your grade is. They can kick you out when they want. So when this guy says heteronormative and he talks about the powers that be, and they use that, right? They used that to set the floor, set the stage in that case. Floor, stage, same thing. There was no stage. To then say we're fighting the powers that be, and that's why I support censoring speech. Here's the professor trying to indoctrinate his students with that dangerous message.
And somebody asked, like, why were they spitting? Well, it's because, like, the speaker had a story where his son transitioned and is now identified, or she identifies as she, and the father, the speaker, still did not respect that. And so then when we're talking about pronouns and respect for gender identification, then that's why things got rowdy. I do think that there's an argument to be made about what that sets up in the future. I do believe, and by no means am I like a violent person, right? But I do believe that
Here it comes.
a lot of noise needs to be made to consider change. Right? A lot of noise.
How does that relate to not being a violent person? Oh, I get it.
If we didn't have a lot of noise, some of the standing problematic ideologies historically would still exist. Does that make sense? Going further, I think this sets up a lot of interesting things, right? Particularly the choices on what speakers are going to be coming back.
Okay, so let's just walk through that really quickly. And I know, Gerald, you're champing up the bit here to get in, but I'm not a violent person, but a lot of noise needs to be made. And I think that opens a legitimate conversation to what speakers... Let's just follow that. It starts with, I'm not a violent person, but... And then it ends with which speakers... Let me ask you, have there been violent protests over speakers on campus?
Watch Louder with Crowder live, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.